Welcome to the 41st Mill Valley Film Festival. We're so happy to have you here today. As you know, this is one of our special big nights. It is a spotlight for the film called Boy Erased. And I want to thank our sponsor of the evening, a local company, you may have heard of them, Lucasfilm.
Thank you, sir.
Boy Erased is directed by Joel Edgerton. You may recall he was here in 2016 with Loving. He is a highly sought after actor, literally one of the finest actors of his generation. But you may not be aware until this evening that he is also a director. In 2015, he directed a film called The Gift. And it was an auspicious debut, and I think this film in itself is just a beautiful roadmap to what you're going to be able to see in the future. What I really love about this film, it's rare when you have a film that really has something to say and is topically relevant, moving, timely, a sense of urgency in terms of the content, and also artistically amazing. And that's what we have tonight with Boy Erased. I'm hoping that Joel is in the house. He is. Welcome, Joel Edgerton.
And Joel, we have this is a spotlight program, and our spotlights offer us the opportunity to acknowledge a film artist at a particular moment in their career. So we're able to give the Mill Valley Film Festival Award not for a whole body of work, but noticing that the work that you're doing right now is really special. And I think Boy Erased is that. I love the commitment that you've made to the subject matter. I love it when an actor directs, because I think that there's a real commitment that you can achieve from your actors, as you do in this film. And it's a sublime experience. It's wonderful work, and I'm really happy and proud to offer you the Mill Valley Film Festival Award.
Oh, wow. I get to say something now. Thank you. Wow, that is incredible. I feel like I do feel like I'm just at the beginning of if people are willing to give me the opportunity to keep making movies. I love being an actor, but I also see acting as one part of the process, and I think that writing and acting and directing are all the same thing. And yes, we're seeing a lot of actors step up to the plate. I can't wait to see Bradley's movie and Jonah's movie, and I just feel like as I get older, which is happening, I saw it in the mirror earlier as I was getting ready, look, what I will say, and I said it outside, is that being an actor in your own movie, it's like being a parent and a child at the same time. For a long time I've been a child because I've had the opportunity to turn up to work with almost zero responsibility but to play and to have an imagination and to have a certain responsibility within the family, a little chore. And being a director is like running the household. And to do both at the same time is a little schizophrenic, and I don't know if I would always do that. But the beauty of running a household is you get to really meet all the people, that the whole village that goes into kind of raising the child and putting the child on screen and making the story happen. And it's a great privilege, and if I can keep doing it, I will keep doing it. And I really want to thank you guys for my time here during Loving, and it's more special to be here as a director. So thank you, Mark and Zoe, who programmed the festival. You guys are amazing. I want to thank Lucasfilm, the very niche little company. What I said about wanting to be a director, I'm still curious about being an actor. Just want to let you guys know if you're in the audience. It's not working, this thing. Look, let's talk after the film. We're going to do a Q&A. So you can grill me about it afterwards. So thank you.
Please welcome back the director of Boy Erased, Joel Edgerton. I love that this is a true story, and I know there's so much to talk about the urgency and why you wanted to do this. But I did read something just recently, and I think it really adds to the positive element that this is the one time that the gay kid at the end of the story, he doesn't have to acquiesce and change. It's his parents, and
yes, it's weird because I was speaking to Josh at Focus. You know, Focus features are the big reason why this film even exists, along with Anonymous. And Josh was saying, in many ways, as much as I came into this project and read the book, because I was reading a book about a kind of a personal experience of going through conversion therapy, because I'm obsessed with institutions and have been since I was a child, is that what I came out with was a film about family, and really so much of the imprint of this film is about and for parents, and about the importance for parents to kind of free up their opinion, whatever that is, whether it's about career or in this case, specifically about sexuality. And as a person reading the book and thinking about this material, wondering what it would be like if my parents, who I identify with as my heroes, let me know in some way that there was something wrong with me when there wasn't, and how devastating that would be.
I mean, yeah, they're incredibly devastating. And when you talk about the fears that one has as a child of abandonment, institutions, prisons, whatever, the things I've heard you talk about, and then it's your parents who are rejecting you totally, that's some damaging things.
Yeah, I remember, one of the, because we had a bit of a discussion over dinner about institutions. I don't know what it was, but this indelible mark that watching stranger danger videos and my nana letting me watch a prison TV show before I was even 10, and my mother letting me watch Death Wish and abduction and all these things like swirling around in my young brain. And the one thing that hadn't occurred to me was one of my other big fears was my parents sending me to boarding school. Mm-hmm. And when I read Garrett's story, it was actually the first time that I'd read an institution kind of tale where the wardens were actually more damaged than the inmates. More so than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
So how was that for you to be playing as a Victor?
Well, that's very complicated because there's a whole other movie in that. Because, the full stop on the end of the movie, I love talking to people after they've seen the movie because it's very hard to talk about Victor or John Schmidt, as he really is called. He was a man who was out as a young man in Omaha and met a Christian girl who told him that God wouldn't love him. And he went into the closet again. And he went there for 30 years. And he knew, I think, no doubt deep down, that the therapy wasn't working. By the way, he invented the therapy. He started as a student or a client, as they're called. And then when they realized that their 84% statistic of success, which I think they just pulled it out of a hat like a rabbit, wasn't working, he went, all right, well, maybe this Freud stuff's not working, so maybe we'll do a bit of this. And then they turned it from that into the 12-step program. So he was part, as he ascended the ranks, of evolving the therapy, just cherry-picking things and seeing what could work. All the while knowing that he was affecting young people and families knowing that it wasn't also working inherently on himself. So he's a complicated person.
Yeah, it is complicated because I think, one of the themes you're talking about is that there are people who really love you and think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And they're really the devil in that regard. What about the character Victor is more complicated than that? One black or white.
Yeah, I think imagine for a second that that heroin or methamphetamines is really actually good for you. And that when you start taking it and everyone around you thinks you have a problem and they want you to go to rehab, that's actually the wrong thing, and that you deep down know that it's good for you to take the drug. That was the way I was looking at the treatment of the parents and the therapists on the character of Jared, was that they really thought he had a problem to which there was a solution, and that what he was doing was causing himself damage, and that their solution would lead to a better future that was more healthy, more productive, more inclusive of community, and so on. That the more terrifying thing was to render these people as people who were really trying to help, who really had a solution to a problem that, as we all know, well, depending what you think, doesn't exist. And that therein lies this incredible catch-22 dilemma for families that, while it might seem like this is 2004, it's still very much going on today. And you might think it's absurd, but your absurd is somebody else's reality. And then how do you deal with it when under your roof, that is the reality? In many ways, this film is there, hopefully, for people, either young people, to identify and say, I'm not alone, and for parents to really examine how they handle the situation.
Yeah, I know there's a sense of urgency that that you wanted to make this, and I think I read a comparison to like when they were still performing lobotomies, and they thought that was good for you too. And there were over 30,000. Did you the credits?
70, and the amount of facilities. I think David, my co-producer, who's here, who's such an integral part of the film, he also plays. He started years ago as my assistant, and I made him be my assistant in the movie. So he plays Michael, and he deserves a lot of credit too, because together with Garrett, he started a podcast which goes deeper into the history of conversion therapy and kind of, takes it out of the roof of just one family and deeper into other things. But, the whole, I'm completely losing my track, by the way. What were you just talking about, so I can get back on?
Well, I was talking about the sense of urgency and how it was, literally compared to what was happening with
the
lobotomies,
lobotomies.
and then how many young people today are having to go through conversion therapy.
So while we were cutting the movie, this is what I was going to say, and I'll get back to that other point, is David said to me one day, he said, you realise that within 20 blocks of where we're cutting in Manhattan are two places where you can take your child and do therapy akin to this. It's like, visit under the banner of like a family clinic. And the analogy about the lobotomies was really about, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is because I love institutions, or I fear them so much I watch movies about them. The book was written 6 years before the abolition of those kind of practices. The movie was made 6 years after the fact, and here we are with a real chance at the moment, I think, and I said this at Toronto, and it's maybe a quick way of summing it up, is that I hope that in a year's time, this movie is not even worth watching.
Yeah, that would be a great outcome. Tell us a little bit about, this is your second feature, and you gave us kind of insight in terms of how important this is to you, but actually, how did it happen? You put this fantastic cast together, Lucas Hedges is amazing. I understand he's on Broadway right now. But your fellow actors from Australia, I heard of them before. And how did this all happen? How from the inception?
Well, I actually knew Lucas better than I knew Nicole and Russell. I knew Nicole and Russell from shaking hands at various...
So there's not this Australian club that you all go to?
No, it's not the hotline, like, hey, making a movie,
Secret
you
pass.
guys better come.
Come on.
I actually... so the evolution was that I kept thinking about Lucas. I realised that when I'd met Garrett, the author, and I asked him to see his family photographs, that it was like, particularly Russell staring back at me. You saw the photos at the end. Herschel, the real father, who I spent time with in Arkansas and visited his church, and Russell visited his church, just dropped in on a Sunday. There's Gladiator up the
I'd like
back.
to be a fly on the wall for that one.
Yeah, someone literally went up to give Herschel a message, and on their way back to the pew was like, I think Russell Crowe's here. And word filtered around the church, and then kind of created this thing, But I saw Russell in Herschel, just a man, like a beast of a man, a tough guy, and yet so soft and emotional. He broke down at the dining table when I had dinner at his place, pointing at Garrett, and he was like, this thing has got me licked, and meaning, with all respect, this whole situation is like a Rubik's Cube to him with his beliefs plus his love for his son, and I felt this incredible love and yet this real bullish pig-headedness at the same time. Anyway, Russell was like the personification of that to me. And then Nicole was the personification of the mother. The obstacle to me was like people were going to think I was making an Australian film. So I was worried about putting them together. But I did, and I'm thankful because they've known each other since she was 16. She said the other day at some festival, she goes, when I first met Russell, he drank champagne out of my shoe, which is what we do in Australia. It's like a hi. It's basically like our hello. You'll see at the party later tonight. Just checking what shoes you're wearing.
They're new, though.
Yeah,
So-
might drink it out of a glass. So then the two of them had this
Bond.
connected, kinetic, able to live in each other's space marriage immediately, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. And the mom is really the hero, and it took her a while to get there, but she's the hero of that, in a sense, in terms of the importance of family and understood what was ultimately happening.
I always think that one of my big themes in my life, and as I look back on things that I've written that were original stuff that I've written, it makes sense as to why this really resonated with me, because I believe it's not so much that you should be judged for what you do, it's you should be judged for what you do next. Because we all make mistakes, we all do the wrong thing, we all get misinformation and we might stumble and fall. But then when you realise you've done a wrong thing, how great a thing is it if the next thing you do is a bigger act of correcting that thing. And that's what Martha represents as a person. She's
Absolutely.
divine.
Yeah. She is a hero. Shall we open it up for questions from the audience? Yes, right over here.
How would this film play in Australia? Do they have these kind of conversion programs there?
Can everybody hear that?
How would this film play in Australia? Do we have those kind of conversion programs there? I'm certain that we do. We have religion there. We have right around the corner from where I grew up is possibly the biggest church in Australia, and if not the world, called the Hillsong Church. They have a policy, until recently I know they've had issues in the public about their perception and understanding and acceptance of homosexuality, which means that no doubt there are in-house programs that deal with how families can correct that issue. In fact, it is an issue because recently we got a new Prime Minister. We've had too many Prime Ministers in the last 5 years, although Some people would argue other
We
countries
could loan
should as
you
well
one.
have new leaders. Not a bad thing to change it up. And he was asked if he would denounce conversion therapy, and he refused to. And that was about a month ago. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that means that the movie would play well to some people and not well to others. The problem with a movie like this, and I experienced it with Loving when we were here a couple of years ago, there's no doubt people who will line up around the block to buy a ticket to a movie that reflects ideas that they believe in. How do you get the other people to see it? And for that reason, you know, it's important for us that we weren't, you know, and I wouldn't have done it anyway. I'm not throwing God under a bus. I grew up in a religious family. God's not on the platter. Like what's on the slab is the interpretation of the Bible by certain individuals and how they use that to serve their own agenda. So how do we do that? You know, how do we get other people to see it? How do we get Christian groups to see it? Because, like, you know, it's not about how we profit for the movie. It's about, you know, this really feels to me more than ever a film that starts conversation and affects change. So how do we do that? And it's about people putting word out there to say, no, maybe you're going through this. Like, maybe you should have a look at this and see how somebody else handled it.
Additional questions? Yes, waving in the front row.
How much weight did you have to gain and how long did it take you?
Russell,
How much weight?
I'm going to give you his phone number. You can ask him that yourself.
Let's call him right now. What time is it?
He might have put on some weight. I don't know how much. I remember him saying to me when I met him, he was like, because Herschel's pretty big, the real dude. He's pretty big, and Russell was, he was pretty big off doing another job. He's like, I might lose some weight, and I was like, I'm okay if you don't. And he turned up as is, and it was good for us. But yeah, I know, but I'll still give you his number if you like.
Okay, additional questions. I can't see in the balcony, so if there's any over here. Oh, you're
There's
pointing
someone up
over there, yes.
Yeah, he is in his own way. David, who I spoke of before, my co-producer, and I, we had lunch with him at a Cracker Barrel in Texas about 4 months before we started shooting. And a neat little sort of note of irony is that Cracker Barrel has a really anti-gay sort of kind of history. They could be, they're not very kind of pro that kind of thing, and he'd chosen that as a venue. I'm not sure if he knew, but we had lunch with him and his husband Larry, and it was kind of a neat sort of weird irony that he used to restore souls and now he restores furniture. But jokes aside, and I have a lot of empathy, and you know, one of the big things we wanted to do was treat everybody with a human eye and understand that everybody really did think they were doing the right thing, and back then he did, albeit partially to bolster his own agenda for his own soul and his own kinship with Jesus, is to feel like if I'm doing this, it's reminding me that I'm doing the right thing. Anyway, so he left the place in a little sort of pause of not really applying therapy to other people. He recognised that he was lying to himself. He came out, he's posted things on Facebook. He's written a book called X'd Out, which I've read, and he's trying to make amends. But, you know, like, for example, a lot of people appreciated his apology. Another child's or, you know, ex-client's response to his Facebook post was just a list of names of people who had committed suicide. And I don't know, and this is how I feel empathy towards him, perhaps because I played him. How do you wake up every day and spend every minute of every day being contritious towards what you've done? you know, I know for a fact, because I've done wrong things in my life, is that you have to redesign a way to get on with life. You have to soldier on, and one way is to redesign events. And I read a thing recently where he was posting a thing apologising on one hand, and in not a true contritious fashion, was blaming the higher-ups of a place called Exodus International, which ran Love in Action, saying that he had been fed the wrong information, that he had been fed lies, that he had been misled. And I think it's, you know, in all fairness to him, it's a way that he can get up every morning and go, I helped kill some people. You know, I think he really knows deep down in his core that there are people not walking around on the planet because he tried to tell them things that he knew weren't working for him. And that's very hard to live with, I think. You know, so I think he does a little bit and then he polishes some fucking wood. You know? But what else are you going to do? But so in fairness to him, he's trying. But if you talk to Garrett, he might say he's not trying enough. And I understand that students of his or clients of his would say, I'm sorry, I can't accept fully because he's still my monster, you know?
Yes, right here.
How do you perform in a film and direct at the same time? So you had a pretty major role. You did a great job. And you directed a major film.
The question is the challenges of acting in a film that you're directing.
It is a bit like, you know, rubbing your belly and patting your head. And it does take a little bit of the joy out of the satisfaction of standing back and watching the whole kind of diorama, you know, unfold, and actors solve problems, you know, from an access point. Because when you're inside of it, it's different. At the same time, there's something beautiful about sharing certain moments, like, for example, with Lucas about his breakout, because it feels like a piece of theatre. It just really is about preparation, and for me, I have the luxury of having a brother who's a director, and I make sure that he's there behind the monitor so that I don't have to keep wasting time going to look at that stuff. Knowing that he's got my back, that he can, you know, less Joel. But it really helps me. But yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I could star in a movie and direct it. I think then every day doing both things would be too much. But I was saying, like before, about being a child or being an adult, that's the problem. Because one hand you're trying to live here, and the director has to live here, and then you know, maybe you just don't really get to fully explore your performance because you're stuck in here a bit.
Yes, over here. We'll come back to you in a minute. The question is, how did you feel the week before with the testimony regarding the Supreme Court hearings?
From Ford. Look, you know, I've been a big advocate of a documentary film called The Hunting Ground. I don't know if anybody here's seen it. I'm sure some people have. It was like a film that came out, and it was so important, I think, and then it sort of, it didn't fall on deaf ears, but it didn't certainly create as much of a kind of a change as it maybe should have. It brought back memories of that documentary to me, and just how women are, and men, you know, The Hunting Ground also deals with how men are almost, like young gay men at college are almost like laughed at for suggesting that they were abused, but women are kind of treated less well than they're accused. Yeah, the people they accuse almost get like a better ride afterwards than, you know, just how delicate it is, and how on a bigger scale the confirmation was a real surprise to me. I actually thought the country, people in general, not the country, but just people were ready to kind of, I understand it wasn't about, it wasn't an actual court case for him, but it was really about character. And to me, it comes down to character. Who are you? So I was very, I saw David, I keep talking about David, he should be up here with me. He sent an Instagram message where he wrote a handwritten letter to her, and then was encouraging other people to do the same. And I think there's a great swell of support for her. It's just a shame that it wasn't sort of accompanied by a lack of support for somebody who, you don't get accused of stuff if you haven't done something.
Gentleman over here.
Yeah, I just had first of all, fabulous film. Really enjoyed it.
I can translate. This guy's Australian. He said it's a fabulous film. He really enjoyed it.
And it's called a shoey, as you and I both know. So I can see you do a shoey later. But I had a question for you.
Yes.
With the accents, obviously you had a Kiwi, 2 Aussies. Were you staying in Aussie directing, or were you going in and out of your American accent as you were directing?
When I'm on set, certain movies, if I have a complicated accent, and the beauty of being Australian is two things. We grew up on American TV, right? Are you roughly my age? I'm older than you, but Brady Bunch, 8 is Enough, Gilligan's Island, Happy Days, every single episode. The American accent is like, kids play in American accents. It's weird. You see the 5-year-old kid talking Australian, and then all of a sudden they're like play acting in American. You're like, what are you doing? But as an Australian, you get to like specify playing this and playing that. So there's all these different American accents. So when I do that, though, I like to stay on set, even if it weirds other people out. Specifically because, like everyone's like, hey, from Australia, you got all these weird spiders and shit, Everything's gonna kill you. And you end up in these conversations, then you got to jump into the scene and you got to like adjust. So I just sort of try and do that. But I was directing some of the clients as Victor just because it saved time. David Dittmore, who's the beautiful guy in there, he's bald and he's one of the older clients. He was standing in the wrong place and then we were running out of time and I yelled at him in my accent. And he just moved so quick. And I was like, if I'd have said, oh, hey, David, do you mind? It would have taken like an extra couple of minutes. So sometimes it's purely for selfish reasons for me, for performance, but yeah.
Probably better than directing it in the accent from Loving. That would have been,
Yeah.
that would have been odd.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question over here.
So just kind of going along with, first of all, I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and a lot of people that I know have actually been through conversion therapy or other things that kind of bear tones of that. And I'm just wondering kind of what you think about institutions that employ some of these ideas in a damaging way, but not as like dramatic, like, oh, this is what we're gonna do now, like we're gonna lock in the security, but use some of these tools that are just kind of like psychologically damaging.
Yeah. So the question's about knowing people that have been through conversion therapy, and there's different ranges of conversion therapy. There are the barbed wire facilities. There are locked dark rooms. There's like hands in buckets of ice while watching, if you're a boy, watching male iconography and reprogramming like you're some kind of mouse or something. But torture. And then there's the ideas, perverse, miscommunicated, upside down ideas therapy like Love in Action was. And then there's this other world that Garrett, the author, talked about, and I was like very fascinated by that. And that's where I realized that I grew up in, which is just where conversion therapy is just in the ether. It's not cool to say you're gay. It's not cool to come out. Like where I graduated from high school in 91, and people said bad words, bad slurs and homosexual kind of insults every single day. Minutes would go by and you're like, I haven't heard that word. And you're like, but never met a single person in my high school that ever came out. My father had one friend that I knew that was gay, and it was like some alien, you know. So it's in the ether. Conversion therapy, or conversion as in like keep your mouth shut therapy, and don't show your face therapy, and don't stand out therapy is in the ether. So from all of those spectrums, we're all taught to not be ourselves unless we're straight, you know, and then it's cool. So that's what I think about that.
We have just time for a couple more questions. Way in the back, I can hardly see you. Shout it out. Yes, in the last row.
I read Garrett's book, and you know, part of this whole investment into reading the book was my whole fascination with the institutions that I've been talking about. But what I came out with was this reflection of family, and because I think I'd seen the subject very black and white. It's like, oh, you know, son or daughter comes out to family, they reject them. But like, what about that space where they deeply love their child, but they just don't have all the information? And there was this sort of like, this thing, I was like, oh, there's opportunity in his family where things could get better, where a child could teach a parent for a change, which I think happens more often than we think. And I became so obsessed with it in a way that I can't even articulate. I was shooting a movie in Budapest. I had a few weeks off. I was like, got to talk to this guy, Garrett. I met him. I said, can I meet some other survivors of the therapy? I went back to Budapest because I had been on a break, and I had 2.5 weeks off in a hotel room, and it was sort of the end of winter. And I started writing a scene from the middle of the book, and then I wrote another scene, and then 2 weeks later I had this very messy first draft, and I've never been like possessed and obsessed by something before. And ever since then, until I had a holiday last week, so it was about 1.5 years, every single day I was doing something about pushing the story forward. And I've never been that motivated by anything before. So on one hand, I don't really know the answer, except that something got under my skin. And loving was a big part of it, actually. Because I was so full of the idea of injustice, having never experienced injustice in my life. And whenever I read a story about it, it just kept reminding me of how passionate I felt about loving. And when I read Garrett's book, it felt like I was reading about the lovings again.
Well, I hope that, and I know that passion will never go away, and I understand it, that when the first time I saw Oxbow Incident, you know, when I was young, it was like, there are just certain things that you can't live with, and we're all the beneficiary of that feeling that you have. And I want to, you know, go back to what I said at the beginning, that when you can make a film that is just artistically excellent in every possible definition of what a good film means, and add to it a message like this that can really make a difference, that is a sign of a great film. So thank you for doing that, Joel.
Well, thank you. Thank you.